There's enough simplicity for every wise man. Sometimes criminals, thinking they're the smartest and capable of planning several steps ahead, overlook the most basic details. It's these simple things that help solve complex cases. Today we'll travel back to the pre-dawn hours of March 2nd, 2010. In the city of Darien, near Chicago, Illinois, a shooting took place in one of the most ordinary homes. The 911 emergency service received a call from a woman hiding in a closet. Robbers had broken into the house, and the entire family was in danger. But who it was, how they did it, and what their motives were remained unknown. The small town of Darien, with a population of about 22,000 at the time, is a suburb of Chicago and ranks in the top 15 best places to live in the county. But this story isn't mentioned in tourist brochures. It all began on March 2nd, 2010. The silence of the night was shattered by a loud, sharp sound, after which, at 3:10 a.m., the Darien Police Department received an alarming call. It was a 25-year-old young woman hiding in a closet in her home. She whispered that someone had broken into their residence in the middle of the night and opened fire. About 10 shots rang out in different rooms. The caller was panicking because the criminals seemed to still be in the house. This young woman was Angela Kramer, and she was calling from her parents' home, where she had spent her entire life. Poor Angela knew that her other loved ones had already been shot and had no doubt that the same fate awaited her. It was a calm, quiet neighborhood, and, by all accounts, the Kramer family fit perfectly into the area where they lived. The owners of a large, beautiful home had never had any trouble with the law, were polite and friendly with their neighbors. A few minutes after the call to the emergency service, police arrived at the scene. The first thing they saw when they pulled up was a young man climbing out of a basement window. At first, his behavior raised suspicion, but it soon became clear that this was Anthony Kramer, Angela's older brother. He had been sleeping in a room on the basement level, and upon hearing gunshots in the house, tried to escape outside. Anthony and Angela were the only survivors that night, and both were in extreme shock from what had happened. The Kramer family consisted of the married couple Jeffrey and Lori and their 3 children, 29-year-old Anthony, 25-year-old Angela, and 20-year-old Michael. The Kramer family was highly respected in the community. Jeffrey ran his own auto repair company, while Lori worked at the McGraw-Hill Publishing House, was an avid gardener, and loved animals. By 2010, the couple had been married for 30 years. Their youngest son, Michael, had recently enrolled in a technical institute and planned to follow in his father's footsteps. All family members were ardent baseball fans, and their home was always known for its generosity and hospitality. But now, 3 of its residents were dead. When law enforcement officers entered the house, they discovered that Jeffrey, Lori, and Michael had been shot. The police entered through the front porch. On the first floor, right by the front door, they found the lifeless body of the family's patriarch, 50-year-old Jeffrey. His wife, 48-year-old Lori, lay right on the staircase, and inside, near the garage exit, lay Michael. All 3 showed no signs of life, each having been shot multiple times in the head. Apparently, whoever did this wanted to ensure the victims wouldn't survive. By that time, the perpetrator was no longer in the house, but Angela was still hiding in the closet where the police found her. Officers asked the young woman to close her eyes and carefully led her out of the house, as she shouldn't see her loved ones in such a state. While several police officers were cordoning off the horrific crime scene outside, a girl ran up to them and said she had also been in the house. It was the girlfriend of the deceased Michael. That night, she had stayed over at the Kramers. That evening, she and Michael had fallen asleep on the couch in front of the TV and woke up when someone broke into the house. When her boyfriend got into a fight with the intruder, the girl realized she couldn't help. She managed to escape unnoticed. She was the only witness able to provide a description of the attacker. According to the girl, it was a man dressed head to toe in black. Judging by the shattered window, he had entered the house that way. The hammer used to break the glass was lying right there on the floor. The stranger didn't hide as he boldly entered the house without hesitation. He smashed a window in the living room where Michael and his girlfriend were dozing on the couch at the time. During the fight with Michael, the man fired several shots. Jeffrey and Lori, who were upstairs, heard the noise and rushed downstairs. Judging by the position of the bodies, the father drew the fire to himself. The wounded Michael tried to escape and crawled toward the garage, but he was stopped by a bullet. Terrified, Lori didn't even make it down the stairs before several shots struck her. Several .40 caliber shell casings were scattered on the floor. There were bullet entry holes in the walls. Footprints were found in the snow in the backyard, leading to a neighboring property. The tracks led detectives to the main street and then disappeared. Nothing valuable was missing from the house, so it was unlikely a failed robbery. The attack seemed more like a targeted execution of the Kramer household. When the surviving family members were asked if they knew anyone among their acquaintances who might wish them harm, Anthony, not understanding, shook his head. He had no ideas. Angela suggested the only possibility: the father of her child. The thing was, they had broken up just a couple of months earlier, after Christmas, and the breakup hadn't gone as smoothly as she would have liked. The woman explained that her ex had anger issues. When he lost his temper, he could do very bad things. During those times, she tried to stay out of his sight to avoid provoking him further. Angela named him Johnny Borisov. She didn't claim he was capable of such a despicable act, but at the same time, no one else came to mind. Johnny was friends with Angela's previous boyfriend, a guy named Steve. That's how they met. Steve unfortunately died in a motorcycle accident. During that difficult time for the girl, Johnny was there for her. The young couple dated for about 2 years, and in 2009 they had a son. They lived together, but after the child was born, Johnny started treating his girlfriend possessively and got jealous over nothing. He tried in every way to isolate Angela, even from her family. Neither she nor her parents liked this. The Kramers were close with their family, and when Johnny forbade them from seeing each other, serious problems arose in the relationship, which only grew worse. About a year before the invasion of the Kramer home, Johnny held a knife to Jeffrey's throat and said he would take his life. A month after that incident, Borisov got into a fight with Lori because he wasn't invited to their son's birthday party. Angela said Johnny had threatened her family multiple times, especially in the last few months of their relationship. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and moved out. That's when the custody issues began. The child's father refused to pay child support and wanted full custody of their son. On the night of the attack, the baby was at Johnny's parents' house. The police immediately took an interest in Borisov's profile. However, before the detectives could summon him for questioning, he called the station himself. Johnny saw on the news that an attack had been made on the residence of his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child. The man was well aware that he would be the prime suspect in the attack, so he didn't wait to be called in for questioning and voluntarily showed up at the police station to talk to the detectives. Borisov knew he'd have to clear his name and was extremely unhappy with the situation. Johnny was very nervous and assured the officers he hadn't done anything wrong. He came in on his own because he knew suspicion would immediately fall on him. The man was worried, but upon learning that Angela was okay, he sighed with relief. In fact, it turned out that Borisov had an ironclad alibi. Surveillance camera footage confirmed that he was at a casino all night until 4 a.m. The shooting occurred at 3 a.m., and Johnny couldn't possibly have been in two places at once. Since this man was the only suspect with an obvious motive, they took his cell phone to check if he could somehow be involved in the shooting at the Kramer house. That night, several calls from a burner phone came to Borisov's phone, along with one voicemail from a guy who introduced himself as Jake. The stranger claimed he was being chased by several black SUVs and would soon have to ditch the phone. Friends, please support these videos with your activity. Subscribe to the channel, put a like on this video, and write a comment when you watch the video. Your activity is very valuable. Thank you. Then a man called 911 and reported that his former roommate, 23-year-old Jacob Nodors, had acted very strangely during a phone conversation and mentioned something about crimes. Jake had called his neighbor to say goodbye, as he thought they might be speaking for the last time. He claimed cops were chasing him, and they could open fire at any moment. The guy was clearly losing his mind. The man explained to the police that Jacob Nodorse had been in a deep depression lately, and if something truly terrible had happened to him, he might not have been able to cope. It also came to light that Jake and the deceased Michael Kramer had been good friends, part of the same group, until they had a falling out a few months earlier. The reason for the argument was that Michael found out Jacob was getting along well with Johnny Borisov, whom Kramer couldn't stand because of his attacks on his family. Investigators began looking into Jacob Nodorse's background. Since the person who called Borisov on the night of the attack also introduced himself as Jake, they learned that the guy's problems started back in childhood. His parents were very strict religious fanatics, not in the conventional sense, and didn't allow their son to interact with other people. If he dared to disobey, he got the full brunt of punishment from both his father and mother. To cope with his problems, Jake started using alcohol and illegal drugs. The guy couldn't stay in his religious family any longer and, at 18, moved in with his grandparents. But his life continued to spiral downward. Two of his friends, with whom he hung out in the same group, had recently died of overdoses, and he caught his girlfriend in the arms of a third friend, after which he cut ties with both of them and was in a poor mental state at the time. Jake met Johnny Borisov when he bought psychoactive drugs from him. The man whispered to him that he was part of a major drug trafficking gang and they were very serious people. To Jacob, meeting Johnny seemed like a chance to join the powerful elite, but he didn't know that his friendship with Borisov would ruin his relationship with his best friend, Michael Kramer. The police took an interest in the complex connections between Jacob Nodorse, Johnny Borisov, and Michael Kramer, and decided to talk to Jake to clarify the situation. The guy had no criminal record, but he had attempted suicide several times. Detectives tried calling his burner phone, but when no one answered, they reached out to Jake's grandparents. The elderly couple was certain their grandson had nothing to do with the crime, describing him as a quiet person with gentle manners. Jake was an auto mechanic by trade and did have mental health issues, but was he capable of committing a crime? After checking several databases, investigators discovered that Nodorse had bought a .40 caliber Glock pistol. This happened just a few days before the shooting at a sporting goods store located 20 minutes from the Kramer home. Apparently, Jake had decided to flee the city for some reason. The police had to call in federal marshals for assistance. A warrant was obtained for a search and to track the mobile phone linked to the burner number. It became clear that the guy was heading south to Florida. Jacob's parents lived there. Nodorse was driving south, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Tears streamed down his pale face. In the rearview mirror, Jake kept seeing flashes of blue and red. He was waiting for the police to demand he pull over, but it never happened. While speeding down a dusty road toward his parents' house, Nodorse even called 911 and reported that he was being chased. Apparently, paranoia had completely overtaken Jake. Detectives contacted the Florida Police Department and informed them that the suspect was heading their way. On March 3, 2010, the day after the shooting at the Kramer home, state law enforcement and federal marshals arrived at Nodorse's parents' house. Jake was peacefully sleeping in a van parked near his parents' home. They took him, still groggy, into custody on suspicion of armed assault. No gun was found on him. Jake had spent the entire night driving. To calm himself, he took illegal substances that triggered hallucinations. That's why he kept seeing police car lights and sirens. It seemed to him that several black SUVs were chasing him. He knew he had committed a bloody crime, taking the lives of 3 innocent people, and now he felt fear and horror at the situation he was in. During questioning at the police station, Jacob was extremely nervous. He didn't say a word about the attack on the Kramer home. Instead, he kept repeating that he and his family were in danger. Only when the detectives managed to convince the guy that they could protect the Nodorse family, and that if he told them the truth, Jake started talking. In his mind, the deaths of the people in that house were his only way to stay alive and save his family. Johnny Borisov and Jacob Nodors became friends in the summer of 2009. They spent a lot of time together. The man even gave the guy a place to stay when he was kicked out of a rental apartment. Sometimes they stopped by bars together, where Borisov met with his friends. Jake saw what kind of people they were. He respected his older friend, and at the same time, was very afraid because of his ties to the criminal world. In recent months, Johnny had been fighting with his ex-girlfriend over custody of their child. He wanted nothing to do with her family, but most of all, Borisov was worried that Angela Kramer knew too much about the gang members and their activities. He told Jake that the woman had threatened to go to the police, so they needed to silence her. Jacob believed everything Johnny told him, but he still didn't understand what he was being pushed toward. When Borisov said the guy would have to eliminate people who were a problem for them, and that if he refused, his own family would suffer, Jake agreed without hesitation. He knew Johnny and his gangster friends could easily carry out their threats. The only way to protect himself and his loved ones was to commit the crime. Borisov also reassured the guy by saying that on the appointed date, there would be several attacks on people who posed a threat to the drug trafficking gang, and he had a chance to prove himself and save his family. But, as it turned out later, no other attacks happened in the city. This suggests that Borisov simply used the naive guy for his nefarious purposes. In reality, there was no gang. Johnny was just a small-time, unsuccessful dealer. He skillfully manipulated a young man with mental health issues and a dependency on illegal substances. A few days before the massacre, Johnny told Jacob to buy a gun. Then he drew a layout of the Kramer house and explained the best way to break in. A specific date was set, March 2 at 3 a.m. For courage, Nodors took several pills and headed to Angela's house. He smashed a living room window with a hammer and saw Michael and his girlfriend on the couch. Jacob didn't dare shoot his friend right away, but Michael lunged at him with his fists. A fight broke out. Jake was afraid his identity would be revealed and fired. The noise woke the parents. Jeffrey and Lori came down the stairs, and Jacob started shooting at them. He just panicked. After dealing with the parents, Nodors caught up with the wounded Michael and finished him off with a shot to the head. Then he fired a couple of control shots into Jeffrey and Lori's heads. Johnny had initially told Jacob to search the entire house, including the bedrooms, but the guy was terrified that the police would catch him. So he quickly ran through the house and didn't find anyone else. Angela was hiding in the closet, and Anthony was sleeping in a room on the basement level, which the intruder didn't even think to check. After carrying out the massacre, Jacob fled through the backyard to his car, parked nearby, and drove to Florida. During questioning, Nodors said he threw the murder weapon into a dumpster near a restaurant. Later, the gun and some blood-stained clothing belonging to the victims were found there. The firearm matched the shell casings found in the house. On March 5th, Jacob was extradited back to Illinois. He was placed in a cell next to Johnny's. Listening devices had been installed in both cells beforehand. Unaware, Johnny began threatening Jake and inadvertently confirmed the entire story he had told. On March 6th, Borisov was officially charged with the massacre. In 2011, Jacob Nodors pleaded guilty to the armed assault on the Kramer family and accused Borisov of orchestrating the attack to get revenge on Angela Kramer, with whom he was embroiled in a bitter custody battle over their young son. He was sentenced to 75 years in prison. In 2013, Johnny Borisov stood trial. His lawyers tried to portray the witness and perpetrator of the massacre, Jacob, as a mentally unstable person and pin all the blame on him, but the jury didn't buy it. They found Johnny guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After breaking up with the mother of his child, Johnny was firmly convinced that the entire family, including Angela, had to die. He secured an alibi for himself, persuaded a mentally unstable person to carry out the massacre, thinking he could escape punishment. And now he's forced to rot in prison for the rest of his days. Borisov's mother doesn't believe her son is capable of such brutality. The woman participates in various projects, advocating for her son's freedom. She complains to the public that Johnny suffers from severe diabetes, kidney disease, and congestive heart failure. And with such conditions, he's forced to remain in a prison cell. But it's hard to believe there's a heart in a man who wished to send an entire family to their deaths for his own whim. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.